All right. I believe we're live on Facebook.
All right.
And let's see if it'll let me get on YouTube this time. All right. We're live. I believe we're live on Facebook.
Oh, all right.
We gotta work that out. And let's see if it'll let me get on YouTube this time. All right. Not gonna worry about that. We will tackle YouTube next time, but we are officially live on Facebook.
Cool.
And Sean, if you want to go ahead and share it around to some different pages or whatever like you normally do, that'd be good. Oh, there it is. I guess while we do that, we're gonna just introduce the topic of the night, which is we're going to be talking about the subject of surrender. And if you're in recovery, we're talking about, specifically about the third step of the recovery process, which is a decision step, or often called the surrender step or something like that. So if you're strong on your Christianese, this is surrendering to God's will. And if you're strong on your recovery ease, we're talking about step 3, giving our will and our lives over to the care of God. And this evening, I'm joined by my 2 friends, Rick Furtado over in Idaho, and also Sean Gregory, my usual partner in crime over there in the beautiful state of Alabama.
Alabama.
And I was thinking beforehand, me and Sean, we've done quite a few of these, but I don't think we've ever done a live stream with Rick yet.
Yeah, I think we have, haven't we? Like we did
the conference.
We had the conference.
We did the conference. But yeah, it's I gotta catch up to you guys. I gotta hang out with you guys more.
you gotta start drinking stronger coffee, man.
Yeah. That's right.
Cut a couple hours of sleep off. sleep 4 or 5 hours a night only. You'll have enough time.
This is what happens when you reach the ripe old age of 52. You want to be in bed by 7:30.
Yeah.
I know you're 2 hours behind us, right? So
yeah, it's 7 o'clock right now.
It was always tricky though when I was still in California and Sean was, in Alabama, because I'd be getting on at 8. Dude, we'd be live streaming until midnight over there in Alabama.
Yeah. He's like nodding off. He's like, oh.
Yeah. But so it's been a long time coming, and I know we had talked about doing one of these for a while now, since we did that conference like back in June or July. We've been kind of talking about doing a live stream. I figured, hey, let's stop talking about it and finally get down to business here.
Right.
And this is obviously a topic that's relevant to all of us because we're followers of the Lord Jesus Christ, and we also all happen to be guys that are in recovery. So we have those common grounds. I was thinking also too, really you 2 guys, probably of everyone that I've known in recovery, I've probably done more ministry and more Bible-based, more Christ-centered recovery with you 3 guys than probably anybody else on the entire planet.
Nice.
Yeah. So
right, and same with you. Rory, you were the gateway into being able to do this and make that leap from the rooms of AA into Bible-based recovery. And so I thank God for that, because that was a big growth spurt that I had in my recovery. Not only in my recovery, my acknowledgement of sin, and as well as just my relationship with Christ.
Yeah, sure. That's what this is all about, man. Growing in the grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ, right? So I definitely see recovery as just another step along the way.
Yeah.
And being guys that have this background and this problem in our lives, it's obviously important to have some sort of program. Because I don't know about you guys, but if I'm using drugs and drinking alcohol, I'm not praying, I'm not doing service, far from God.
I have a hard enough time doing in diligent prayer and service to God sober,
Yeah.
right? I have a hard enough time being a diligent, faithful servant, right? And like, there's zero chance I'm going to be able to do any of that.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna.
Oh yeah. So I was talking with Leah. That's another one of we've done live stream with her, and I'm actually getting ready to do another one with her in a couple weeks on a pretty heavy topic. But me and her and Sean, we're all on a group chat or whatever. And I said, yeah, we're going to be doing another live stream, whatever. And she's like, oh yeah, what have you guys been doing it on? She said, how we're doing it on the topic of surrender. And she's like, man, that's a big topic. I said, well, I'm not claiming that I'm good at it, but
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about it,
That's for sure. Not for me, at least.
Lots of room to grow.
I used to say everything that I hand over to God has claw marks in it.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that from just from my own experience, man.
Yeah.
I shared it to our pages like Broken Vessels and Incorrect, but there's something going on, man. Like I can't get it out to any of the groups, but I sent a bunch of links around, so hopefully we'll have some people coming in. And
Yeah,
maybe
we'll keep an eye on the chat. So if anybody wants to interact with us.
So
yeah, I've been seeing a certain someone back on Facebook. Have you talked to that certain someone since the last few days? I don't want to drop any names, but
yeah, well, yeah.
Okay.
No, I haven't talked to them, but they're out and about. So
okay, cool. Well, maybe we'll get some interactions tonight. All right, so I guess without further ado, I was thinking start by reading the third step, right? Because we're all familiar with the 12 steps, but there might be somebody joining us tonight who's like, what the heck is the third step? Or what's the 12 steps? So I'll read the third step to everybody out of the Life Recovery Bible, which is worded slightly different than AA or NA or the typical kind of secular 12 steps rendering of the third step. The Life Recovery Bible is just a little bit different, not much different, but a little bit different. So the third step from the Life Recovery Bible says we made a decision to turn our wills and our lives over to the care of God. And I think the only real difference is that AA's is in the past tense, which is funny, but made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So the real big difference being there that the Christian literature takes out God as we understood him and just says, turn our will and our lives over to the care of God, right? We're Christ-centered here. This is a Bible-based recovery discussion tonight. So we're Bible-centered guys, we're Christ-centered guys. We're not talking about Allah or Vishnu or Cthulhu or the Tooth Fairy or Tinkerbell or anything like that. We're talking about the God of the Bible. We're talking about Jesus Christ.
hey, can I say something about that real quick?
Yeah, sure, man.
Just to touch on that, because I'm in as of like for the last month, I'm in a lot of AA recovery groups on Facebook, NA recovery groups. And there's a question posed. It's like, can I be my higher power? And this is the thing. I just want to touch on this because I answered the question in there, but logically, that's very inconsistent. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because in step one, if I admitted that I was powerless over my addiction and compulsive behavior and that my life had become unmanageable, and then, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. In step three, I can't take the power back, because you see in step two that you are saying that a power greater than yourself. So, and what we do here is we're saying that there is a power greater than you, and that's Creator God. That's the God of the Bible. That's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? That's the God that we look to, because we know that power is greater than ourselves. So logically it's inconsistent, because you're saying, okay, I'm powerless here, but now in step three, I'm going to take the power back. And you can't take the power back, because if you try to, you completely miss step one. I just wanted to say that. That's just a disclaimer. So,
Well, let me just read this. And this is from AA literature too. So, I mean, leave it to Sean, man. Just, this is like, we're already in the TAG here, essentially, right? We pre-sup the whole thing. And that's what I do too. I'm always pre-supping.
Yeah.
All of this stuff. Once I started to try to adopt the biblical worldview, I just started picking apart everything. But, if we look at, so this is how I've always answered it. So in AA, typically, pretty much every meeting you go to, you do a reading from the How It Works chapter. It's like the first, essentially 2.5 pages of that chapter. He goes through the 12 steps, and then he has like a little summary blurb here. And he says, our description of the alcoholic, chapter of the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. So he's talking about the chapters that came before this How It Works chapter, which is the 5th of the AA Big Book. And then he has these 3 bullet points right here. It says that we were alcoholic but cannot manage our own lives, right? That's basically step 1 summarized, right? We're powerless, unmanageable over alcohol and drugs, whatever it is. That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, and that God could and would if he were sought. So when somebody says, tells me or asks that they could be their own higher power, I'm pointing to that right there. Probably no human power could relieve our alcoholism. You
Right.
are human power, so you cannot relieve your own alcoholism. So whether or not they're taking the book seriously, I think that's how I would always answer that right there as well. According to the book, I don't think you can do that. If you're inventing this, playing by some sort of standard that you want to play by and you want to play God, I mean, go for it. But I don't think that's consistent even with AA's literature.
No, to me, even in AA's literature, it says we had to quit playing God in our own lives. And, how are you going to, there's all kinds of philosophical sayings that, it's like, even the most simplest one, you can't fix broken thinking with broken thinking. And it's like, how are you going to break that cycle of sin and brokenness and everything else? Like, how can you do that?
Yeah.
And it's a power outside yourself. And taking it a step further, I know people and this is, that I love, dearly respect, and have good AA programs. And this is not bashing of the AA, but this goes to the topic. And I always tell people, whenever I share in the rooms of AA, I say, hey, I'm not going to tell people what to believe. This isn't, the forum for doing that. I'd love to talk to people after the fact, about what I believe. But if your higher power isn't the highest power, then it can be trumped by something else. And it's always in combat with something else. So just because it's elevated a little higher than you, doesn't mean it's not just, a couple rungs up on the Jenga game and it's going to come all crashing down.
Yeah.
So when I talk to people about, I know people that, they say, well, one of the guys that was very early in my recovery says my uncle is my higher power. My uncle who's passed away. I knew another guy says my father who passed away was my hero, and he was, he's my higher power. And I think that it's okay to have like a role model in terms of like how you want to live your life. If that person was, good, sober person that had good principles in their life and things like that. But at the same time, there's a difference between a role model and, a creator God that you can anchor yourself to. And one you can pray to and one you can strive to, try to be, and if that makes sense. And I think that the two get, it can get convoluted in our recovery, and it can make the water a little muddy.
Sure.
And I think it's and I really, really think it's a negotiating tactic, so we can still be in control of who our higher power is versus full and complete and total submission.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
Isn't it funny?
I didn't even know this was going to go this way.
Isn't it funny how we thought that we did have control when we were using and we were out in active addiction, when we were out of control. We didn't have control over anything. I didn't have control over my finances. I didn't have control over, my thought processes because I was always under the influence. I did not have any sense of clarity, right?
Yep.
So that so-called control or so-called free will that I had at that point in time, it wasn't. It was bondage. It was bondage to the drugs and the substances and the idolatrous lifestyle or whatever you want to call it. I don't care. I mean, the addiction. I was in bondage to that, and it called the shots, not this guy right here, and so basically I think that with surrender, it's just, the change of authority, I'm in control and I'm able to be obedient because now I've given my will and my life over to the care of God, and he's the one that dictates yay or nay, right? He's the one that has these righteous, holy standards that I try to surrender to daily, right? So that's just my thought process on that.
No, I totally agree 100%. And I think one of the bigger issues is, I always kind of liken it. I always say when someone said, like you said, the only reason when I was out in my, full blown alcoholic addiction, that I was able to control my finances is because of auto pay. And I actually have because I had money in the bank. Like, other than that, like, if it was left up to me to write checks or actually go online and make these payments, I would have had cars repossessed. I would have had nowhere to live. I would have had none of that. Right. And I think that what I tell people when they say, well, I don't think my life is unmanageable. The question that I pose back to them is, are you just managing your unmanageability? Like, are you just basically, are you just still stuck on the rodeo floor playing the rodeo clown, right? Or are you actually in control of this whole thing? Really? No, I don't think so.
I will say this too, so because I don't want people to get the impression that we're just, we got on here and we're going to bash AA, because we're obviously not. We've already read from it. We've been live for a couple minutes now. We've already read from the literature. I'm gonna read a little bit more from from the AA book. And I think everybody on here has a high regard for Alcoholics Anonymous, but we also, we have a higher regard, for the Bible. And sometimes it's hard to reconcile the two.
Yeah.
But I think if we go back to We Agnostics, that's the chapter before the how it works, the chapter that has the official wording of the 12 steps in the AA book. It talks about, making a beginning with God and like a starting point with God. But if you read the literature carefully, it's not really endorsing these beginnings with God. It's saying that we make a beginning with God, however inadequate it was.
Right.
So I've always seen that as basically the writers of the big book saying, look, we understand that some of you guys have problems with the traditional understanding of God or spirituality and all that kind of stuff. But God will meet you where you're at. And all that matters is that we have a shred of willingness to begin to pursue God, and as much as you understand the God. Yep. Because your initial understanding of God, it's going to be inadequate. It's not going to be good. You don't get sober day one. You're not R.C. Sproul after 2 AA meetings. You know what I'm saying? You don't know the finer points of theology, or you don't really know much about recovery or anything. But you're making a beginning with God and saying, look, I'm going to trust this. I might not even know what it is, but I'm going to trust this, and I'm going to be willing to grow according to that higher power. So I think it's important to approach these conversations like, the guy believing his dead uncle, hopefully that's just an inadequate beginning. Hopefully that was the starting point, and he's moving on to a more fuller view of God or something like that. Yeah.
And that's, I think that's in my experience, You know, if you talk to some of these folks, I think that, you know, you definitely see growth of people. I see more growth from people in, you know, I just, you know, just was in 8 years, right? So I've seen more growth from people that came in as just like pure agnostics that didn't, or maybe even atheists, like they're kind of like bordering in between, right? Where they just, you know, they kind of said, I don't know, I need to keep seeking. And they saw the miracle happen, and they actually just would continue to pray. And, you know, God would, through his common grace, reveal
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
of his grace, right?
Yep.
And I think that what some people do is they treat the higher power like a box that you check
Mm.
and never have to revisit it. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to go, and my higher power is so I can get into step 4 because my sponsor says I need to get into step 4. Now I have to pick a higher power. I guess my higher power is, you know, Alexander Hamilton, right? And it's like
Yeah.
all of a sudden the box is checked and I'm moving on to step 4. And I'm praying to, you know, Alexander Hamilton or Odin or whatever it is that they're really, really not seeking a true, you know, anchor for their life and their spiritual life. And I always I always tell people just to keep seeking and keep, if you're 100% comfortable with your relationship with your higher power, it's probably not sufficient. That's kind of one of the things that I definitely say, because I always, you know, every single time I turn around, I don't feel like I always feel like I want to do better. I always want to, you know, basically I just always want to be a better guy than I was before. The only way I can do that is not of my own power, but continuous, you know, seeking and submission to Christ and Christ likeness. So, you know, the other thing that I kind of, I've in when I go to meetings and when I hear just in normal conversations with people, you know, they talk about, you know, letting God do things. I'm going to let God, you know, do his will in my life versus I'm going to, you know, I'm in my will, or you know, a lot, the way I kind of reconcile that with people, if I get a chance to discuss that concept with them, is when, you know, considering, you know, you're on a, you know, it's basically, it's like a strong current. God's will is like the strongest current on the ocean or on a river, right? You can try to do what you can to swim upstream. You can try to do everything you can to swim across stream, but regardless of how hard you try, God's will is always going to take you where it wants to take you. The good part about submission is that you don't get exhausted when you do it, and you feel peace.
Yes.
And that's the best way I can equate it. So, do you are we live, or do we?
I don't know what happened. I think it cut out.
Really?
Yeah, that's why I was sending the questions, because I'm not seeing it on the Facebook page.
It still says we're live though.
Yeah. But are you on, is it on your actual profile? Is it on your profile and not Reformed and Recovered?
No, it should be on Reformed and Recovered.
It says
It says
Farm
live.
Recovery is live. Yeah, I think it's live. I'm looking at it right here.
It's streaming on yours.
It's not streaming on mine.
Yeah. Interesting.
It might just be coming up funky, but because I'm looking at on my phone versus on Facebook, and it's different times.
Well, anybody that's watching, we're sorry. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties here.
I don't know why it would have cut out.
I haven't checked on my phone, so but yeah, hey Rick, to touch on what you were saying, I actually watched a little video on I watched a little video on Surrender before we got on here.
Yeah.
And this lady, she likened it to her and her husband went white water rafting, right?
Yeah.
And whenever she went to go white water rafting, they learned that they couldn't fight the current. And so what they had to do is quit paddling altogether and
Mhm.
just ride the currents out. And they came out of it obviously because that was like 5 years before, but they just had to let the boat ride the currents of I guess you would say